Welcome to C&S-Sportscast, everyone. I am Sam Deering. He is Christian John, and we are excited to have you with us. And this has been one of the most historic off seasons in NBA history that we've ever had. So we're going to break this up into 2 weeks. There's quite a bit that has been going on. There's quite a bit that still we are waiting for it to happen. So today we're going to talk about the Jimmy Butler sign and trade, the 76ers as a whole, and then multiple teams to go through, like the Jazz, the Kings, and the Bucks, and several more. So let's get started. Now, I get the big name for this week we're going to talk about is Jimmy Butler. Um, what are your thoughts on that sign and trade? Do you think, I guess, no winners and losers, but necessarily, but how do you think this trade impacts the Heat?
Well, of course, it's a positive impact. They did give up a nice young player who can shoot and defend in Josh Richardson. However, they bring back Jimmy Butler and they kind of move on from Hassan Whiteside, who at this point kind of lazily played his way out of Miami. And they get Jimmy Butler, who's an all-star, who will bring people to the stadium. And then they also bring a backup big who can shoot in Myers Leonard. I like this for the Heat. I think they'll be a playoff team again next year finally, and yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Heat. I know this is the only thing they've done so far. We could see more, we could not. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I do agree. Whiteside he kind of put his stock down the past year or two that he was with Miami. So I guess it's not that surprising that he's gone. But I'll be interested to see who they play or who they move around to adapt to that. But I got a feeling since the way Whiteside played the past year or so in Miami, it shouldn't be that hard to adapt to that. And you're right. Jimmy Butler's going to buy tickets. He's gonna sell out. I think he's going to sell out arenas now in Miami. Not that they never did with Dwayne Wade, but I think it almost seems like they're leaving off. They're leaving right where they left off. But I think they're going to be a playoff team once again. And Myers Leonard in Portland definitely boosted up his stock. I don't think I think many people. I don't think anyone saw that coming that he was going to get traded. But I do think Jimmy Butler and Myers Leonard could be a scary backcourt in Miami. So, um, any last thoughts on the Jimmy Butler trade?
I really like it for Philadelphia too because Josh Richardson's a guy I don't think a lot of people know a ton about, and that's a shame because he's a very fine basketball player. He's he's really going to help space the floor for them, and he's really going to help make things work with what they did so far this off season. And we're about to get into that, so I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, definitely. And you and I talked about this before. I did not see like any of these moves coming by the Sixers. I did not know they had that much money to spend, and they just threw out the offer, the max contract offer to Ben Simmons, and they paid Horford 4 year 94, and then they re-signed Tobias for 5 year 180. Now that is quite a bit of money that they've spent already this offseason, and we're just a few days in. Um, Horford's an interesting fit for Philadelphia. You've got two big men, which we all know that Philly's kind of known for having quite a few big men in Embiid and Ben Simmons and several guys that they've drafted that they've utilized um, from previous NBA drafts. But I think I'll be very interested to see how Horford and Embiid play together on the court. I know Horford has played power forward before, so perhaps they can move him to power forward and obviously keep Embiid at his primary center position. I'll be very interested. How do you think the lineup is gonna. How do you think the lineup will pan out in Philly?
Well, I think they'll go Simmons plays point guard, Richardson plays the 2, Harris plays the 3, Horford plays the 4, and Embiid stays at the 5. I don't know if Tobias Harris is a true small forward anymore, and I don't think Al Horford's a power forward. I just don't. I know he can move his feet fairly well, and he's had success staying in front of guys like Giannis, but he's not getting younger, and I'm worried about their floor spacing because unless something dramatically changes, Ben Simmons won't be a good shooter. Tobias Harris shot 32% from 3 last year in a 76ers uniform. Josh Richardson can hit the 3. Al Horford can hit the 3. And Embiid is very hit or miss. There will be games where he makes multiple threes, and there's games where he's scared to take it. So I think floor spacing could be an issue, but defensively, this team's going to be amazing. Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Al Horford, Joel Embiid are going to be good defensively if Al Horford can still move his feet like we saw last season. So I think these moves could very much work out for the Sixers, but a lot of it depends on Simmons and if he can actually improve one of these off seasons and how well Al Horford ages this off season.
Yeah, from the way you explained it, Al Horford definitely seems like a hit or miss player, especially with that contract, which we will get into next week. Briefly, it was a 4-year, $94 million deal, which we'll go quite in depth with on a few of these guys' contracts. But for judging from that contract, it kind of seems like he's going to be a hit or miss player. Al Horford can be a lethal defensive player, and I do agree with you. Philly's going to be a scary defensive team, and their offense is going to depend on how certain guys, like especially Ben Simmons and Al Horford and those guys play. So, moving on, actually, I want to switch this up. So, as long as we're talking about Philly, they lost JJ Redick to the New Orleans Pelicans. And I do think that was a solid pickup for the Pelicans. And I'm not even going to say this is bold because I think this could very well happen. I think I think the Pelicans are going to compete, if not clinch the 8th seed in next year's playoff run. What are your thoughts on JJ Redick joining NOLA and the impact he'll have in the Pelicans as a whole?
It really interests me that JJ Redick signed a 2-year deal right away in New Orleans, just because that's showing a lot of faith in a team that had the number 1 pick. They just traded their best player, and it seems like their backcourt was kind of full already with Lonzo Ball and Drew Holiday. So I'm not sure where Redick fits in quite yet. I love the pickup for New Orleans. JJ Redick's a great shooter, and I definitely think around guys like Lonzo Ball and Zion Williamson, you're going to need guys who can shoot the ball, space the floor. But I'm not sure quite yet what to make of Redick going to New Orleans on a 2-year deal so quickly. It shows a lot of faith in David Griffin and the way he's going to run this New Orleans franchise. It shows to me that JJ Redick thinks that this New Orleans team will be competitive right away, and his shooting will just translate right away to a big role for him because Drew Holiday, to me, is the starting 2 come opening night, and JJ Redick's not going to play the 3, so should be interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah, I do love the fit, but it'll be very interesting seeing as the depth they already have at guard. And I'm also very interested to see how guys like Lonzo Ball, Ingram, and Josh Hart learned off of playing behind one of the greatest players in NBA history in LeBron, if not the greatest player in LeBron James. I'm very interested to see what they learned playing behind him. I do think Lonzo Ball has the potential to be, and I've always been a Lonzo Ball hater, but I do think he has the potential to improve and to be a good player. Um, Josh Hart has shown some sparks. I do think that was a steal in grabbing Josh Hart. Um, and Josh Hart, I think, is going to be a very useful guy off the bench. And as for JJ Redick, um, I think it's a well-deserved contract, and it'll be very interesting to see the lineup come opening night, seeing as they have so much depth in guards. And I honestly want to see where like the starting lineup for like the rookies, like which rookie starts. Obviously Zion, but any other of their draft picks, any of the other draft picks that they drafted, um, to see how well. Summer League's going to be very interesting as well. So, moving on to the Utah Jazz. I know Ricky Rubio was quite a quite a big loss. They lost into Phoenix. What are your thoughts on the Utah Jazz? How they've utilized their offseason thus far?
The Jazz have killed it. The Jazz might be having the best offseason of any team yet. They replaced Ricky Rubio with Michael Conley to prepare him with Spida Mitchell in the backcourt. And then they bring in Bojan Bogdanovic, Jeff Green, and Ed Davis. They bring in Ed Davis to replace Derek Favors, who they had to waive. So they're going to be extremely good defensively with Michael Conley, Spida Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Bojan Bogdanovic. And they're also building that bench with guys like Jeff Green and Ed Davis. I love what they're doing. I think the Jazz are definitely a team to watch out for.
Yeah, I think that Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell backcourt could be very scary, seeing as Donovan Mitchell is only getting better from his second year in the NBA. So moving on to Sacramento, the thing that interests me most about them is Harrison Barnes. Seeing as since he's left Golden State years ago, he went to Dallas and got an overpaid deal, and I'd like to know who his agent is, just because he expected a max deal, and I want to see he got around 90 mil. So he got quite a bit less than he expected. And I don't want to say he's like downgrading, but he's definitely not worth a max contract. I know we said we were going to talk about this next week, but when I think of the Kings this offseason, Harrison Barnes is one of the first people that comes to mind for that. What about you? What do you think the Kings like wins and losses for them, or what impactful players or guys have they done or signed?
I like a lot of what the Kings did. I don't know if Harrison Barnes is a $20 million a year player. I think it was 22.5 because I think it was 4 for 90.
Yep.
But I love that they brought in shooters. They bring in Dwayne Dedman, who can protect the paint. He can shoot threes. Harrison Barnes can defend. He can shoot threes. Trevor Ariza lost the step, but he can still somewhat defend. He's a good team defender now, I would say, and he can still hit the three. And then they bring in Corey Joseph to back up De'Aaron Fox. They're doing what they have to build around De'Aaron Fox, and that's bring in shooters and guys who can defend. I love it. I think this is the year that the Kings finally break through. They finally make the playoffs behind Fox, Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, Marvin Bagley, and a couple of these other free agent acquisitions. I definitely think Sacramento fans should finally be excited for once.
Yeah, I definitely love the young team that they've built around guys like Bagley and especially even Darren Fox. And I think Trevor Ariza is a great addition. The veteran experience, and you've got all the leadership in him. So I think players like Darren Fox and Bagley, I think those guys are going to learn quite a bit off of Trevor Ariza. So moving on, this to me, out of all the things that we're discussing tonight, is probably the second most important thing that's happened. That's the Milwaukee Bucks and Brogdon trade. But first, let's talk about Milwaukee and what they've done. So a lot of people are upset by the fact that we signed Chris Middleton to a max contract.
No, he took less than the max.
He took okay. Phone was broken.
Five.
I apologize, but 5-year.
5 for 178, so he got less than Tobias Harris.
Okay, yeah, because when that first day he was offered like 190. So I really don't know. Like I understand why, and as a Bucks fan, you really can't complain at all. Even if it was the 190 deal, you can't complain because Chris Middleton fits in our system so well, and especially like you have to build around Giannis. And at this point, you have to listen to Giannis because if he wants all those guys on our team, that's what you give him. And especially, you might as well do what you can this offseason because next offseason, you're most likely going to give him a supermax, which is 100% what he deserves. And I think the Bucks have done very well so far, signing Robin Lopez to a 2-year, $9.7 million deal, and the Lopez brothers are finally together.
Oh.
Yeah, Lopez Square, baby. it'll be very interesting to see how they both play together. And some people, I had one friend tell me, why would they sign him? It's a $9.7 million deal, so it's only 2 years. So if he's really that bad, I don't think it's going to be that much of a risk. But I do like the signing, and I love the contract. And very glad we brought George Lopez back at the contract that he was at, or at the contract we gave him. And from the playoffs and towards the end of the year, he definitely deserved it. And also bringing in Wesley Matthews, actually Marquette Golden Eagle native. So that'll be nice to have a guy like him back in Wisconsin. It'll be nice to have a guy like him off the bench. And very interested to see come day one who Milwaukee starts to replace Malcolm Brogdon, who we will get into shortly. What are your thoughts?
I love bringing back Chris Middleton. He was definitely the second best player on the Bucks last year. He was an all-star, and whatever people say, I believe he deserved to be an all-star last year. You bring back most of your starting lineup. You bring back 4/5 of it, which it was somewhat difficult to believe that you would bring back everybody from that team last year. But you're able to bring back Chris Middleton. You're able to bring back Brook Lopez. You get to keep George Hill to come off the bench, which is nice. And then, like you said, you bring in Wesley Matthews, who, like you said, a bench piece, which is what I believe he will be. My prediction for the opening day lineup would be Bledsoe, Sterling Brown, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez. And then as far as the Robin Lopez contract and everything goes, you needed a backup big, and why not bring in Brook Lopez's brother? I mean, Brook Lopez worked out, right? Who knows? Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle twice with Robin Lopez. I also love the familiarity and the chemistry because Robin Lopez and Brook Lopez, I mean, obviously there's the chemistry there. They're twins. But also, it's something that I don't think has been talked about enough is Robin Lopez and Wes Matthews played together in Portland, so they know each other very well too. So when you bring in new guys, it's always good to have them integrated quickly. And I think Horst set it up where the guys he brought in will be able to be integrated into the system and integrated into this Bucks locker room fairly quickly.
Right. And I think Milwaukee fans should be happy. I don't think they should be too bummed about the Brogdon loss because if you think about it, when Brogdon was hurt, when he went down, we had George Hill, and the Bucks were not a terrible team at all whatsoever. So, and that moves us into the trade. So, the sign and trade is a 4-year, $84 million deal. And then they sent him on his way to the Pacers for a future first round and 2 future seconds. And I do think whoever we draft next year could be a potential playmaker with that first round pick.
If we use it.
Right. If we even use it, if we end up trading it. I do think this could turn out very well for Milwaukee. It all depends on how well they utilize these picks. Like I said before, if they trade it for an asset, that a bigger asset, much more needed, or if they use it on a playmaker or stuff like that. And 4-year, $84 million, kind of an iffy contract for Brogdon. It'll be very interesting to see how the Pacers play, how he himself plays without an MVP. He has Oladipo. He now has Jeremy Lamb. Interesting to see how Darren Collison retired.
Couldn't believe that.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising.
That was crazy.
I was listening to, I believe it was 97.3 The Game, focusing on like family and faith or something.
Yeah.
Which respectable, yeah. I believe.
Man, is your family and your faith worth $10 million? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I cannot remember what religion he was, but yeah, I know he's like big involved with the community, so well, good for him. But
whatever religion it is, it's important to him.
Yeah, that's for sure. But before we go into the Pacers, I just want to say don't sleep on DJ Wilson. I think he's definitely earned his way to a potential starting position, or even like a 6th or 7th man off the bench. He definitely deserves more playing time next season, and I think he's only getting better from here. So moving on to the Pacers, and like I said before, the Pacers signed Jeremy Lamb, Malcolm Brogdon. I really don't know what to make of them. And Oladipo's back.
Well, Oladipo probably won't be back, I thought, until January.
Okay.
So that's what concerns me the most about Indiana. That's why Lamb makes sense to me.
Right.
Lamb can fill in. Lamb's a good player. But I'm worried about their point guard situation. Because the way it looks to me now is Malcolm Brogdon's on opening night will be starting at point guard for the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers lost Darren Collison, like you mentioned, to retirement, and they lost Corey Joseph to Sacramento. So the only guards they have at the moment that I can think of off the top of my head would be Malcolm Brogdon, Jeremy Lamb, and Victor Oladipo. Victor Oladipo obviously won't be playing. Oh, and they have Aaron Holiday, excuse me. But I don't think Aaron Holiday is going to be their starting point guard come night one. So the backcourt's probably going to be Brogdon and Lamb, and neither of those guys are good passers in my mind. And I don't know if either of them can really defend point guards for a long period of time. I like Malcolm Brogdon as a shooting guard, and I like Jeremy Lamb as a shooting guard. I don't like either of them as point guard.
Yeah, they still have work to do, and part of me thinks they're not done. They could sign maybe one more guy, but I don't know. I think as much as that has happened so far in these past few days, um, it's getting to the point where it's limited, especially their needs. Like you said, they're loaded at the point guard position, and that team to me, if I'm looking at it right now, is not a playoff team. And
I think they're a playoff team, but man, it's
I
losing
definitely, I don't know. Like I
Bojan,
really
Thad
think I
Young.
really think you're cutting it close. Um,
I definitely don't think they're better than when free agency started. You lose Bojan, Corey Joseph, Darren Collison, and Thad Young, and you bring back Malcolm Brogdon and Jeremy Lamb. It's not enough at the moment.
they're solid players to bring in, but yeah, like it's you
Two
need
nice
more.
pieces, yeah.
Right, you need more assets, and
Right. I
that's
mean,
great. That's great. Like you mentioned Philly. I'll mention this too. Miami and now the Pacers. They're loaded at the guard point or like a guard
the
shooting
two
position.
guard, yeah, but
You need more pieces. Like that. Like if I'm looking at that team right now, I don't see them as a playoff team. I see them maybe competing possibly, but I think it's getting to the point in free agency is where
there's not a lot left.
right, it's very limited, and I think I don't know. Like I almost want, especially since they paid him Brogdon 4 year 84 mil, that might be their big strike this year, this
Oh
offseason.
yeah, it is.
Um,
Oh, it most
and I
certainly
think
is.
if they do anything else, it's going to be a bench guy, unless they can somehow snag a starter. Or I really don't know. But if I'm looking at that team right now, they're not a playoff team. I think
I'm
they
definitely
definitely
worried
need
about
more
Indiana.
pieces. Absolutely, and I
I'm
think they
definitely yeah.
um. So we're gonna end with a little lightning round of teams that have briefly signed some brief players. So, except for Boston, Boston's a great team to start with. You lost Al Horford, you lost Kyrie, but you bring in Kemba Walker. Personally, if I'm the Lakers GM, I would bring in Kemba Walker over Kyrie. I I do think Kemba Walker fits better in Boston than Kyrie Irving. Um, if you saw the series against the Bucks, Kyrie's shooting percentage has dropped quite a bit when he was on the floor. And if you look at the stat line, the Celtics definitely played better without Kyrie. And I know he said at the beginning of the year, I think it was like during the preseason, he got interviewed in the middle of the court, and he says, "I'd like to sign a contract and come back, or I'd like to come back to Boston if you let me." To the fans, I'm like, okay. So after that interview, or whenever the game is done, go to the GM's office and sign a contract right now. And I think towards the end of the season, you could just tell the frustration between Boston. And I think Danny Ainge screwed up. Brad Stevens ended on a really bad year, especially coming off the past year or two that he's had in Boston. Um, I do think Danny Ainge, Kemba Walker was a big strike. Before the offseason started, I think Danny Ainge lost as GM, but I think Kemba Walker's a big ass. He's a big addition, and I do think he will fit better than Kyrie did in Boston. What do you think?
I like Kemba's fit in Boston. I do think the chemistry thing will be better with Kemba. They replace essentially Al Horford with Inez Cantor, which obviously is a downstep. But if Tatum and Brown and guys like Robert Williams can all improve, I think Boston is definitely a playoff team still. They'll be competitive, but I'm not as worried about Boston this season as I was before watching their implosion last season. Because preseason last season, Boston looked like they could be the team to beat in the East, but obviously that was for naught. The chemistry never worked out. We'll see how it works with Kemba. I do think that it's good that Boston was able to replace an all-star point guard with an all-star point guard, but there was no replacing Al Horford completely.
Right, and Enes Kanter's a decent addition. Obviously not a upgrade. He's definitely quite a bit of a downgrade. And if I'm as a basketball fan, I would if Horford went to the Sixers. From what the Sixers have done, if you disregard the money, I'd be more worried about the Sixers than the Boston Celtics.
Oh yeah,
because I still think. Depending on where Kawhi goes, which will be talked about next week, the East is the Bucks conference to lose, and I think one of their only challenges to face is going to have to be Philadelphia. But Kemba Walker is definitely a big strike. As a basketball fan, I didn't really know how to feel about that, but it makes quite a bit of sense, seeing as they lost Kyrie, and it'll be interesting. And I'm glad I think he turned down the rumors saying that he would accept a pay cut to stay in Charlotte, which I'm glad. I get he loved the city of Charlotte, but Kemba Walker, he deserves so much better. So that moves us into Charlotte. Scary Terry is no longer a Celtic. He is now headed to Charlotte to be with the Hornets. That's interesting to me because he definitely shut down the Bucks in last year's playoff run, but did not do a whole lot in this series. So a new fit. I don't want to say a rebuilding team, but you don't have Kemba Walker anymore.
Well, I don't know what else you'd call him. Charlotte's rebuilding.
Yeah.
They're
at
in
this
trouble.
point, I guess Terry Rozier is a decent guy to build around. I don't know. I'm very interested to
Charlotte's in
see.
trouble.
Yeah.
You can say it. You can stop being nice. Charlotte's in a bit of trouble here. Real quickly on Rozier, because I don't think it's that big of a deal. Maybe he'll be probably the starter, and maybe with
You're not going to start anyone else. Like there's nobody. They have a young team, and I think they do. Like it really depends what they do in the next few years in the offseason, drafts.
Well, they'll be picking high. We know that.
Terry Rozier is, I guess, a solid guy, but like I really don't know.
He's young. We'll see what happens when he gets more touches.
He has potential, right? He has potential. It'll be good to see him starting on a rebuilding team, and he's inconsistent though. I don't know. I really think he's an interesting guy to build off of. I wouldn't have expected a rebuilding team like Charlotte to say, "Hey, let's go get Scary Terry and bring him in and build around him." But yeah, Charlotte's starting over. Frank Kaminsky's gone. But yeah,
Kemba, Jeremy Lamb.
Kemba's gone. Jeremy Lamb. Yeah, they're definitely going to be one of the three worst teams in the NBA next year, if not the worst. So that ends with the Dallas Mavericks. They struck big. I know they were looking at Kawhi briefly. There were quite a few teams that were. I know there were quite a few teams that were looking at like all these big, like the Sixers were looking at KD briefly, but the Mavs were looking at Kawhi actually quite a bit.
That was more of a pipe dream. You just look to look.
There's no way. Like if I saw,
ask a married man. There's no problem with look. It's not bad to look, but that's all they were doing.
But
Dallas has had a nice off season. Some people thought they might get a big name free agent, and who knows? I do think they still have the space because I know they were interested in Danny Green, and if Kawhi goes not to not Toronto. Danny Green probably goes to Dallas and makes this offseason really wrap up. But giving Kristaps the max contract to stay and build around him and Luka, I think that was the right decision. They bring back Maxi Kleba, Dorian Finney-Smith, and JJ Barea, which they're all pretty meh bench pieces. I do like bringing in Seth Curry. Seth Curry's a really good shooter. Obviously, he's not his brother, but he's definitely a good three-point shooter, and that's just another nice bench piece to have. And really, I think Dallas is going to be a case of Luka and Kristaps carry the team, and hopefully the bench guys can do enough to keep them in games. But
Yeah,
I definitely think they can. I definitely think they can win that way, though,
I
because
think
I think Luka and Kristaps are that good.
yeah, I think they could be competitive as well. I do think if they keep their chemistry, I do think they could potentially compete for an 8 seed, if not get very close to competing for a playoff run, because that team has nothing but a bright future ahead of them. And I think Porzingis and Doncic, two young guys, could be that's going to be scary together. And like you said before, they needed more shooters than they got one, and Seth Curry was a solid addition. Solid bench player, maybe potentially like a sixth man, but or a starter even. But Dallas has nothing but a bright future ahead of them, and I definitely think they could potentially compete for an 8 seed next season.
Oh yeah, and I'm really rooting for Danny Green to go there.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that'd be awesome to pair him with Luka and Kristaps. Oh man, sorry guys, I'm a Luka fan. It is the way it is. I'm rooting for Dallas. I'm rooting for Dallas all the time now. But I definitely like where Dallas is going. I think they're on a good path.
I think they're leaving right where they left off with Dirk retired. I think Dirk left on a very high note, and that team usually when a team loses a big player, they're usually not as good. But I do think they're going to be just as good, if not better. I do think they're making some winning moves this offseason. So to end, we have one big name, I guess two big names in DeMarcus Cousins, but we have one name that we've not mentioned, that's Kawhi Leonard. We have saw, if you read the rumors, he's potentially going to he's seriously considering a 1-year max deal to stay in Toronto. And I think if he does that, he's got 2 rings. And why would you want to stay in a 1-year max deal when it's only going to be 30 to 40 million? You're going to go get paid. And I think the Clippers is still a possibility, but KD and Kawhi did want to play together. And I really think that if Kawhi really wanted to go to the Clippers, that he would have went with somebody else. As much as I hate to say it, I do think he's going to be a Laker. And I do think the Lakers and the Nets are going to get a lot of bandwagoning fans. But as much as I hate to say it, I think Kawhi is going to be a Laker. And I do potentially think we could see him sign by the end of this weekend. I'm going to say it Monday or Tuesday sometime. But yeah, I think this free agency is most likely it's going to wrap up with Kawhi. I did see he's going to announce his decision on like PBS or something, so that'll definitely be fun and exciting to watch. What are your thoughts?
He carried Toronto. He did everything for Toronto in that playoff series. Of course he's going to go to the Lakers. It's not going to just be him. It's not going to be he's going to go to a team and they're going to ride him. Kawhi's going to go to the Lakers, and he's going to get to play with 2 great players. And he is not going to be the only guy who's relied on. I think the move to Los Angeles makes sense. I know his sponsor in New Balance is hoping he goes to Los Angeles. I think him going to the Lakers just makes too much sense for him to not do.
Yep. And that's most likely what it's looking like, most likely, because the Clippers, I think, are losing out on it. And it's looking like Kawhi's going to be a Laker, and I think he'll make a big mistake if he goes to Toronto. For actually your reasons exact, literally the only guy, Fred VanVleet and Siakam were probably the biggest help that he's had. Kyle Lowry didn't do a whole lot, and Marc Gasol didn't. He's definitely not what he was
Marc
when he was in
Gasol had his
Memphis.
moments,
Had
but
his
yeah,
moments, yeah. He was very
he's not that.
inconsistent. He's not what he was in Memphis at all. But Kawhi's a Laker. I think the Lakers are going to be fun to watch. As much as I don't want him to be a Laker, it fits and it makes sense. Um, you just want to see a team stop the Warriors like Toronto, but you don't want to see one player stop the Warriors. You want to see an entire group of 5 guys stop the Warriors. If the Warriors are even contending, or if they become vulnerable if the dynasty's ending, I for one think that they are still going to potentially be. I think they're still going to be contending. And I think the
But we'll
Warriors are
get into
definitely
that next week.
right. I think the Warriors are definitely a team to talk about next week. So that wraps it up. It was quite the eventful night. We are going to save part 2 of the NBA free agency special for next week. And hopefully Kawhi signs with the team. It's most likely looking like the Lakers. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we will see you next week.